This episode is brought to you by the Boneyard Huskies Club. The Boneyard Huskies Club empowers UConn student athletes while providing UConn fans with access to exclusive community, utility, and rewards. The Boneyard Huskies Club is excited to announce Locker Mania. If the UConn men's basketball team wins the NCAA championship, fans who purchase a Boneyard Huskies Club men's basketball 2022-2023 season collectible will automatically receive full credit back for each purchase, and the athletes will still receive the full revenue from sales of their collectibles. For more information, go to boneyardhuskiesclub.com. That's Huskies with a YZ at the end. boneyardhuskiesclub.com.
Okay, we just hit less than a month to Selection Sunday, so there's only one person to have on this podcast. He's getting ready. You could see him in the bunker there. He's hunkering down. It's ESPN's Joe Lunardi. So welcome back to the podcast.
Jared, always a treat to see
you. Thank you. So UConn fans have been very excited about bracketology this year. Team got off to a hot start. They've had some ups and downs this year. So I think from a bracketology standpoint, it's been a pretty interesting season so far for them. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think if we could have gone straight to the NCAA tournament from the non-conference portion of the season, they might be the number one overall seed.
It's crazy how and it's not even just UConn. It seems like every team this year has gone through those ups and downs where one day they look like they're unbeatable and then looks like what happened to them. So
I think their ups and downs are a little more extreme than most.
I'd say you're probably fair on that standpoint. As you look at this UConn team right now, what's your overall thoughts on them and where they stand in this bracketology process? Because to me, just looking at what's out there, it seems like unless this team really tanks this last little bit of stretch here, it seems like they might be locked into that 4 or 5 area. Is that where you see this team kind of going forward?
I do. I think, they set themselves behind the 8 ball early in the Big East. So it's kind of hard to seed UConn ahead of a Marquette or ahead of even Xavier at this point, simply looking at the standings. It's one of the few conferences that still plays a true round robin and not an unbalanced schedule. So, if you finish 2 or 3 games ahead of somebody, that means you were 2 or 3 games better than they were over the course of 20 league games. So that doesn't mean that UConn can't go the furthest in the NCAA tournament, or for that matter, win the Big East tournament, right? I mean, they're playing at their home away from home, and they have great designs on being there again in March, potentially, with a pit stop at Albany.
Yeah.
But in order to make that happen, a little bit of a move up the seeding chart wouldn't be a bad idea. To give them, the closer you are to the top, the more likely you are to get your preferred geographic destinations.
If UConn gets, they've shown signs of getting back on track with a big win over Marquette. They played Creighton tough on the road. The schedule softens up a little bit for them, the final bit of the regular season here. What do you think it takes? What do you think it takes for this UConn team to work itself up that seed line? So, I mean, would you say there's a ceiling of maybe a 3 seed? Should they go on a run, maybe win the Big East tournament?
Yes, and I suppose even a 2 is not completely out of the question, but there's really not all that much difference between a 2 and a 3 anyway.
Yeah.
I guess you could get a slightly easier path in the earlier rounds, but, that's usually more about matchups than anything else. And once you're in the regionals, even if you're playing the 2 as the 3, then it's just a question of what color uniform you're wearing.
Yeah.
And look, like we said, this team at its best can beat anybody,
right,
including the current number 1 team in the country.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's no reason to be anything but hopeful for the Huskies, but I would be looking, they're pretty decent favorites in every game the rest of the way. And, what's the hardest game the rest of the way? Maybe in Philly to close the season.
Yeah.
They really they really have every opportunity to maybe even look better than they are in these
Right.
last 5 games, 3 at home. The 2 road games are both games in which they'll be favored. I look for them to win them all. And frankly, I don't know that I'm confident because, yeah, it was a tight game at Creighton, but neither team was artistic.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, let's be honest, they won at Georgetown because the other team was Georgetown, not because the winning team was Connecticut.
No, fair points there.
Okay.
I'm curious because I feel like as college basketball in particular has really started to dive into all of the analytics out there, whether it's looking at KenPom, looking at the net, those have held UConn consistently high throughout the year, even when they were struggling and had lost 6 of 8. I think they were still 6 in KenPom, 7 in the net.
Yep.
How do you value those data points there from KenPom, the net, and those type of things as you're evaluating this team?
Well, they built up a lot of equity early. And, kind of like in baseball, I always say, you get to May 1st or May 15th, somebody in the majors is hitting 450.
Yeah.
Because it's a smaller sample.
Yep.
Right? And sure enough, we haven't had a 400 hitter since 1941 for a reason.
Right.
And it's UConn's, bad stretch wasn't long enough to undo all the hits they got in April.
Right.
And now they're at least back to being regular good.
Yeah.
So the qualitative side of the metrics related to efficiency and offensive and defensive per possession metrics are still going to be pretty good for them. In some places, even the best in the Big East. And, again, if we go back to the beginning of league play or the 1st of January and people voted a Big East power rankings, UConn would have won going away.
Right.
At that point. And they may yet again, because, finally they seem to have a stretch in league play that a lot of the other contenders have already had.
Right. Yeah.
Coming at it. They got to take advantage of it. And
for sure,
easier said than done, because some of those teams are playing for their postseason lives or playing for seeding in New York or, playing for their coaches' jobs, to be quite honest.
I think one thing that UConn fans have been intrigued by, and I know you mentioned it a little bit earlier, is the path to go Albany, MSG. That's your path to a Final Four. Do you see UConn being able to still be in a position to line that up where they can get that Albany MSG route? What is it going to take for them to get to MSG? Because it seems like Albany could be or could be relatively close to, I don't want to say a lock, but at the 4 or 5 range, probably end up in Albany at a minimum, I would say. Would you agree?
I would agree, in part because the Northeast is weak.
Yeah.
Relatively speaking to the rest of the country and its normal, standards.
Right.
So, there's no Syracuse in the mix. There's not, back in the day, a Marcus Camby UMass in the mix. Teams that would be naturally competing for those spots. Villanova, right? I mean, just not. It's not happening. So I do think Albany is fairly likely, maybe 70-30, 80-20 kind of odds. Now it gets tricky after that, not just because, I mean, you would think, okay, well, UConn could still be the best pure Eastern team on the board.
Yep.
Right. So why wouldn't they be naturally slotted for the East region and the Garden? Well, because there's a ton of other bracketing principles that come into play, as you well remember from your brilliant performance as in fundamentals of bracketology, whenever that was. And, like, suppose they're even a 3, right? But the other 3s are, Baylor, Iowa State, and Kansas State.
Yep.
Right? Well, we know that the top 4 teams from every conference have to go in different regions. That, and if they're on the first 4 lines. So if the Big 12 has got 4 or 5 teams up there, which they do and probably will, well, one of them might have to go to New York as the 3 or the 4 simply to be separated from their conference mates.
That makes sense.
And that could bump Connecticut somewhere they don't want to be. It wouldn't change Albany, which could feed wherever. It's not like the old days that Albany would be locked to the Garden.
Right.
Right. Like we haven't had that for a number
of Albany could end up in Vegas, for instance.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And, you know, in a way, if I'm a UConn fan, I actually think the Garden is more important than Albany.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Like obviously there's no Garden if you don't win 2 games somewhere.
Right. Exactly.
You have a bird in the hand.
Yeah.
But you know, having the juice and the more homish crowd will probably be more handy in a 2-3 Sweet 16 game.
Exactly.
Than it will be in a 3-14 game against, you know, McNeese State or whatever. Not that we haven't seen those teams lose also.
Right.
But and it's a big but yeah, I would pack for Albany as a UConn fan, but I wouldn't pack for 2 weekends.
Okay, that's fair. And you know what? If they end up in Vegas, it might even end up being a little bit of a cheaper ticket if you want to go. So
and it might, you know, it might not have anything to do with them.
Yeah,
we can blame the Big 12. The Big 12 is going to be the bracketing bogey.
I'm going to take a quick break from the interview to tell you about my friends at Martin Rosol's Meats. This 4th-generation Connecticut family business produces kielbasa, hot dogs, sausages, and deli meats using Martin Rosol's very own original recipes. Their products can be found in grocery stores, delis, restaurants, and hot dog stands throughout the state. And if you're looking for your fill right away, check out their retail store in New Britain. For more information, visit martinroselsinc.com and go support a UConn fan-owned business. And now, back to the interview.
And that's a perfect segue as we talk about the conferences here. How do you view the Big East this year in comparison to the other major conferences out there? Because for the past few weeks, I think they've had at least 4 or 5 teams ranked in the top 25 as you look at it from that standpoint.
Well, it's definitely better than the Pac-12. And I think also better than the ACC. So of the Power 6, if you will, we're already up to not better than the Big 12. I don't think better than the SEC in terms of the top teams anyway. And you know, we could certainly argue that after Purdue, it would be comparable to the Big Ten.
Okay.
But I mean, the Big Ten does have Purdue. And you know, in spite of dropping all the way to 3rd in the polls and 2nd on the seed list, I think it's fair to say that if Purdue were to join the Big East tonight, they would be favored to win.
Yeah,
and that's okay. But I mean, I still think the Big East has had an excellent year. And if you look, you know, like I tend to look at second weekend potential as a sign of both quantity and quality, right? So, I mean, UConn can be in the second weekend. Marquette can be in the second weekend. Creighton can be in the second weekend. Xavier, if healthy, can be in the second weekend. I even think with the right draw, Providence could be in the second weekend, although they seem to be slipping a bit. And, you know, you get 3 or 4 teams in a Sweet 16.
It's pretty good.
Doing a great year.
Yeah.
Because almost every game at that point, unless you're looking at an obvious number 1 or number 2 overall, every game at that point is a 50-50 game.
Yeah.
You know, who's playing well that night? Who's got the best matchup? And are the stars shining? And UConn has stars.
For sure.
Fine.
Yeah. So we'll see how that part plays out. For the other Big East teams who might be tuning into this, it seems like of the rest of the conference, Seton Hall is probably the only bubble-ish team in the conference this year. Is that how you're
Agreed.
viewing it? And
Yeah, the others are all, in, right? Those top, what did we say? 5? The top 5
yeah.
are all in. Seton Hall, now next 4 out. I think probably not good enough.
Mhm.
Probably not quite as good as their resume, actually.
Right.
And because of that, and because of the kind of natural ebb and flow of these things, as we've studied over the years, more teams by this late stage playing their way out than in, including the Pirates, I think they're probably going to miss.
This is a fun hypothetical that I was throwing around the other day. Say history repeats itself. Georgetown wins the Big East tournament again. Where are you seeding Georgetown?
I would still put him in the NIT. Well, I mean, what did they get that year? They were a 12.
Yeah.
And well, they wouldn't be a 12.
Yeah.
Because the 12s right now are the likes of Oral Roberts, top 40 net.
Yeah.
Whoever wins the A10, Southern Mississippi, or whoever wins the Sun Belt, and I think Liberty.
Okay.
And they're a good bit behind all of them profile. But to win the Big East, their profile can only go one way.
Right. You're getting probably 3 quad 1 wins there.
Yeah. So, plus they're hot at the end, and it does kind of catch people's attention.
Yeah.
But I would have to look to a couple of years ago when they did do it, and I don't think they were starting this far off.
Right.
What do they have? 1 Big East win?
Yeah.
Yeah, they had more than that.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
In fact, you keep talking, I'm going to look, because now you're making me wonder.
It's just one of those things that I was thinking about watching the game the other day, and it came to my mind.
Hey, you need a better hobby. I mean, that team was 9-12 in the regular season, 7-9 in the Big East.
Yeah.
This team is only getting 7 Big East wins if they play with this team for 5 more years.
As you look at the college basketball season as a whole, I feel like there have been a lot of surprises this year, and I'll wrap with this one. What's been the biggest surprise to you to this point in the season, and maybe something you're looking forward to see the rest of this season?
I think the big picture surprises are Purdue and Alabama being where they are.
Yeah.
2 teams that were thought to be good to very good, now going to be 1 seeds. And at the other end, the 2 teams they're in place of, Carolina and Kentucky, being somewhere between bad and suck.
Right.
And to be candid, and I picked Kentucky to win it all.
Yeah.
And I think UVA 19. I think the last 3 tournaments, I've correctly picked the national champion in October. Well, that's not going to happen. And, that's bad enough, but to not even make the tournament, maybe in Kentucky's case, like you should get your resume together. Maybe you should be sitting in my chair.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's what we love about college basketball, right? We get these crazy surprises on both ends. Well, but Joe, I really appreciate the time. I know it's busiest time of the year for you. You're holed up in the bunker there. I hope it treats you well the next month or so here.
It will, Jared, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on.
You got it.